Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm Tess from the Arty Crafty Place and I'm here with a new printing tip video for you. This week I wanted to talk to you about sponge dabbers, when to use them, how to use them and why we use them. And that really all relates to two-colour or multicolour printing. So today I'm going to be sharing with you lots of tips and techniques for when you want to add a little bit more detail to your printing blocks and to your prints by using more than one colour. Now this is really easy to do, you just need a little bit of practice, but I'm going to give you some tips that are just going to give you the confidence to try more and hopefully get better prints, because really when it comes to block printing, the more you know, the better you'll be. So hopefully you'll be able to take some of my tips on board and it's really going to help in your own printing. So if you don't already have any sponge dabbers, these are definitely an essential piece of equipment for any block printer's supply cupboard. Now, the reason we use sponge dabbers is for multicolour printing. I tend not to use them unless I'm working with more than one colour on a printing block, but they are quite good for children, or if you're very messy, then they do keep your fingers away from the sponges, compared to a square sponge where you're really holding the sponge where the paint is. So these are our normal square sponges, which I tend to use for one colour or single colour printing. And then you've got sponge dabbers, which we tend to use for multicolour printing. Now you can still use these for single colour printing, but I'm going to share some kind of ideas with you later and explain to you why I tend not to. So hopefully everything I'm going to let you know in the next couple of minutes is really going to help. So hopefully everybody that's watching this video has block printed before. If you haven't and you're new for block printing, just please save this video and you can come back to it later along your block printing journey, because this is really a little bit more advanced than single colour printing. So it's great if you've already had a go at block printing and you're looking to develop your printing further. But I'm specifically going to show you how we do multicolour printing. So that's applying more than one colour to your printing block. And just a couple of tips and things that make this easier, because sometimes people think you have to print the block twice. Maybe the first time in one colour, then the second time in the next colour. But that's not the case, and the sponge dabbers make multicolour printing really easy. So like I said, when we're using multiple colours on a printing block, we tend to use our sponge dabbers, which are these really funky sponges on sticks. And like I said, they keep your fingers really clean. Now they come in a variety of sizes. You can buy them all individually, or you can buy a pack of 4 that comes with one of each size. So that is this set there. So you get a very small one, 2 kind of medium ones and a big one. So that's really handy to have in your cupboard, but you might want multiple of each size. So depending on how much you're printing, maybe purchase a couple of packs for yourself. And you use these in exactly the same way you use the square sponges, but it just makes your two-colour printing easier. So I've already got some of mine on my paint tray along with my fabric paint. And you use them the same way as your square sponges. You dip them in the paint and then you tap off the excess. So that sponge can start to absorb some of the paint. And you can always have multiple sizes in one colour, because it's very important that you use the right size sponge dabber for the block you're using. And I'll show you more about that later. So I'm going to get my sponge dabbers ready by dipping them in the paint and tapping off the excess. And then I'll show you a bit more about two-colour printing. So let me first off start by printing this Indian mandala in one colour. So I'm using my square sponge that I just used for single colour printing, and you tap the paint all over the surface, getting a nice coverage of paint, going back over it a few times, and then I can print this and I'll show you the single colour print. So that comes out really lovely, beautiful colour, and the pattern is gorgeous. But there are ways to bring your block to life even more, and that is kind of exploring more multicolour printing. So next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 colours on my printing block. So I'm going to start with a light blue in the middle, and I'm going to do a darker blue around the outside and see what effect I get. Now, when you try to do this with your square sponges, because they're quite big, you end up just using the corner of the sponge, or it gets quite smudgy. And when people start being so precise and just using the corner of the sponge, you end up not getting enough paint on your block. So by the time you print it, it really just looks very faded and faint. So what you need to be using is sponge dabbers. And this way you can be very precise where you get the paint, and you can make sure that you're still able to get that detail of the two colours, but you're making sure you're getting enough paint on the printing block. It's really important that you always use your sponges flat. Again, if you start using the corner of them to be really precise, you're not going to get enough paint on the block. So it's really important to use them flat. And I've done my light blue in the middle. Now I'm going to do my darker blue around the outside. They are slightly blending together, but that really is going to give me the best result. When you're two colour printing, something really important to kind of recognise and remember is that if you're too precise and too careful about where you're putting the paint, you're probably not going to get enough on the block, and then you're going to get a bad print. So what's really important with two colour printing is getting enough paint on your printing block, but also still getting the nice definition of two colours. So let me try printing this one now. Turn that upside down. Again, you print it in exactly the same way, but hopefully you can see I've got this gorgeous two colour print. And now when I print this with the two colours on my fabric, so if I do a cushion cover or a tea towel, I've just got something extra special. So you can see you've got one colour printing and you've got two colour printing. And it just really brings your block to life, and that gives it that bit more detail. And that is really helped by using the sponge dabbers. Now I can even try and have a go at 3. Let's have a go with 3. And I'll show you the effects we get from that. So let's start with a blue in the middle. So I'm tapping the paint on confidently using the bottom of the sponge dabber. Then I'm going to go with my green. Let's do a bit of khaki. And I'm not being so precise that I'm worried about the blending. I think it's better if you're less precise, because if you're doing it so carefully, you just don't get enough paint on the block. And then let's go for a dark blue around the outside. That kind of blending really helps as well if you're not being really precise. It helps the colours come out more. And then let's try this. And up. So another really gorgeous print. And this one's got 3 colours on. I've got an Indian aqua in the middle, a khaki green and a midnight blue. So really beautiful. That's a 3 colour print compared to the 2 colour print. Now, next up, I'm going to show you with our large Moroccan tile. This one is great for 2 or 3 colour printing, and I'm going to show you why. Now, what you do want to remember is that you're always using the right size sponge dabber for the block you're printing with. So for example, if I wanted to ink this all up one colour, I'm not going to use the tiniest dabber because it's going to take a long time and the paint isn't going to be distributed very evenly on the block. So for something like this, if I'm printing the whole middle with one colour and the edges with another colour, what I'd use is a bigger sponge dabber for all the middle. So I'm getting a nice quick coverage of paint. And then let's maybe use one of the medium ones for the outside. So you can see why it's really useful to have a variety of sizes of these sponge dabbers so that you've always got the size that you need. So I'm going to dip this in my paint and I'm going to tap all the way around this Moroccan tile with purple, and then I'm going to do these little bits on the edges a different colour. And I'm really making sure I'm getting enough paint on the block. And using the kind of rounded edges of the sponge dabber to work around the design makes this really easy. But it's very disappointing when you ink your block up and you print it and it doesn't come out perfectly, because most likely because you haven't got enough paint on it. So you really want to be feeling very confident with using 2 colours. So that's all inked up. So let's turn this over and print it. And there we go, really, really lovely, clear two-colour printing. I've not got any smudges of the paint colours, so this one's a really good one for two-colour printing because you've got clear separation between the different colours. So I'm going to print this all over and show you how it looks. And there we have my Moroccan tile printed in two colours, which is dusky and midnight blue. And you can see I've got really gorgeous two-colour print. So there's no mixing of the colours or anything. And I'm really happy with that finished result. Now, one of the last blocks I want to show you multicolour printing with is our Meadow Design. Now, this one gets used very often for multicolour printing. And I want to share with you a few tips to make sure that you're going to be getting good results. So sometimes with this design, because it's got lots of different components, it's got seed heads, it's got dragonfly, it's got flowers, it's got grasses, people try to be a little bit over ambitious and try to add lots and lots of different colours onto here. And then by the time they go to print it, some of the paint has already dried on the block and you just don't get a very good effect. So I'm going to show you a couple of do's and don'ts and show you how beautiful this block can be when you multicolour print it. So when I'm doing this, I tend to do the bottom kind of green or whatever base colour you want, and then you can add the addition of different colours. But you don't want to be so precise you're not getting enough paint on, like I said earlier. And that's what I see happen with a lot of people. So because you're being so precise and only using the corner of the sponge, you just don't get enough paint on. So it definitely requires a little bit of practice and just really playing around with it so that you're getting the best results possible. So you can see when I'm applying this paint, I'm not being really careful, I'm being relatively quick with it. And that's because I'm really making sure I'm getting enough paint on the block. So I'm not too worried about the colour mixing, you know, different colours mixing together. That just adds to the effect of it really. But I do find that when people are too precise and try to add too many colours, it just actually doesn't look as good as it could do. Let's add a bit of pink. So at the moment I've got khaki, Indian yellow, Indian aqua. I'm going for some dusky and I'm going to go for midnight blue. So that is 5 colours I'll be using on this block, and I'll show you the results that we're going to get. So always using the sponge dabber flat, making sure I'm getting enough paint on, and you can always go back over it if you need to and adjust any of it, or put a little bit more paint on if you're worried you haven't got enough. Now, lots of people often ask whether the paint dries on the block before you print it, and that shouldn't ever happen, as long as you print it within a couple of minutes. But it's just a bit about practice and seeing how long it takes to dry. So this is a 5 colour on this meadow block. Let's see the results we get. Beautiful. So I've got some really nice colour mixing in there, and you can see I've got a whole variety of colours on my meadow block, and actually it's printed really well. All of it is very defined and you can see all the different colours, and I've made sure that I've got enough paint on here. So I'm going to show you how it can go wrong. So I'll show you the don'ts so that you know to avoid it at home. So sometimes people are so slow at getting the paint on and using the corner of the block that you don't end up getting enough paint on, or you miss some paint off. So I'll show you how this looks so that you can make sure this isn't going to be happening to you. So can you see the difference between these two prints? Now, this was my first one that's come out really well. It's got plenty of paint on it. It's got the different colours on. Whereas this was my second print, and it's come out a lot fainter in places, and bits of paint are missing off areas and things. And the colour and the paint just isn't as strong as it can be. And that's because I was being too precise and too careful. So there really is a balance. So you really want to play around with this and find the happy medium. And just always make sure you're applying enough paint to the block. So I hope my quick tip video has given you some ideas on two-colour printing, given you the confidence to have a go, and just shown you what to look out for. I know I've probably given you quite a bit of information, but the key points are to always use your sponge dabbers flat, so that you're always using the bottom of the sponge, never the corner or the edges, as you won't get enough paint on your block. And always make sure that you're not being too precise, that you're not getting enough paint on. Sometimes when we're so careful and so detailed, you don't get enough paint on the block. And then once you print it, you'll be disappointed with the results. So really have a practice and a play with multicolour printing and make sure that you're printing it perfectly at least 5 times before you move on to doing your item. If you're kind of having different results on each print, it's probably best that you try it in a different way. So maybe simplify it more, or just go through the tips that I've just shared with you and making sure you're getting it perfectly. I can't go on enough about practicing your printing with guests in my studio and things, especially before they move on to an item. If they're doing multicolour printing, we reiterate practicing it and really making sure you're getting the perfect print over and over again, so that once you print it on your item, you're going to be really happy with the results. There's never such a thing as a mistake when you're block printing, there's just variations. But obviously you want to be really happy with your prints, and when they're coming out really strong and colourful, you're going to be a lot happier with the result. So I hope this has inspired you to try 2 or multicolour printing. Get online, get yourself some sponge dabbers. You'll not regret having these in your collection. You'll be able to see that it makes such a difference to your 2-colour printing than trying to use the square sponges. Because you can imagine, if I was to try and ink up my Meadow Design using the square sponges, you just don't get enough paint on because they're too big for the area you're trying to print. So thank you very much for watching. Please comment in the comments box if you have anything to say, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much. Bye.